Hello and welcome back to Banjo Strings and Drinking Chords, How America Culture Came to Be, the podcast of the Frontier Culture Museum of Virginia. I'm Alex.
And I'm Rachel.
All right, so we are here in our costume shop at the Frontier Culture Museum, and we have our happy sewers all frantically working on various projects. So what we're going to do today is we are going to actually talk about how we actually produce a garment. Let's focus on a singular garment. You guys are all mostly working on the same project. And we'll talk about how we conceive of our projects, how we actually produce them, and what you guys are learning. So, you guys want to go around and introduce yourselves and what project you're working on and how long you've actually been learning how to do historic sewing. Sam, why don't we start with you?
Hi, my name is Sam McGinty. I am the costume coordinator for the Frontier Culture Museum. So it is my responsibility to run the costume shop and also sort of coordinate those that are sewing and assist them with the completion of projects. The projects I'm working on right now, the most immediate one is finishing up a pair of leather breeches. We recently had basically an exchange where we sent staff down to Colonial Williamsburg to learn from their tradesmen, and I was sent to the leather breeches shop to learn that particular skill, which they're in the process of reviving. So that's what I'm working on. I'm also assisting the rest of the people in the shop with various projects and working on a couple of coats on the side.
Lindsay, you're next.
I'm next. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm currently working on a waistcoat for our MTA, Military Through the Ages. I just finished our Crockett coat that I was working on. And I've been around the museum for about 6 years, and that's where I learned how to sew.
Hi, I'm Lorelai. I am currently correcting my absolute folly of making some cuffs on some sleeves a little too big. That resulted in a 3-man team trying to get them off of the person who's supposed to be wearing them. He has tiny, beautiful little delicate bird wrists, but much larger hands. So I am stretching it right now through a process of dampening the wool and stretching it over our lovely tailor's sausage. And I will go to more extreme measures if necessary later. I started sewing when I was 5, and then I blacked out, and now I'm here. So.
My name is Abby. I am currently working on a Crockett coat as well for the MTA, Military Through the Ages, and I'm almost done with it. Just got to do the buttonholes. And I've been sewing probably since I was 5, but I've been historically sewing mostly in the last 6 months.
And I am Caitlin. Technically, I guess, tinsmith here at the museum more than any sewing, but I do a lot of sewing too. I've been doing historical sewing for 20-ish years now. Because I started when I was 5, and that's kind of where I started at, was with historical stuff to begin with. And I am working on a Crockett's coat, but also a apron to be worn in the tin shop. So a couple of things.
All right, so you guys have mentioned that a lot of you are working on things for Crockett's. Sam, why don't you kind of explain your vision for what Crockett's is, what Military Through the Ages is, and why it's important that we have all of these garments?
Sure. So the Frontier Culture Museum for a long time has explored or tried to explore frontier culture and really what that means. And really in the context of looking at the frontier culture that formed here in the Valley of Virginia, or the Shenandoah Valley, the most clear and obvious representations of or manifestations of that frontier culture come about through the 1760s and especially in the 1770s with the War for American Independence, or the Revolutionary War. So the goal that we've had for quite a while is to flesh that out, especially in the run-up to the semi-quincentennial, or the 250th anniversary of Virginia and the Revolutionary War, to develop a military impression that we can bring out for special events like Military Through the Ages at Jamestown, Yorktown, or for various programs like the 4th of July and our reenactor weekends here at the museum, that we can sort of represent a military unit that embodies that quote-unquote frontier culture. The unit that we selected to do that with was Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Crockett's Western Battalion, which was a state battalion raised in the back half of the Revolutionary War in 1779 and 1780 for the defense of Virginia's frontier. They're sort of very specialized troops, armed with rifles, which really is the weapon of the frontier in a certain sense. And in a lot of ways, in their material culture, sort of what they're wearing and what they're carrying and what they're doing, they are a pretty strong representation of the frontier culture that we talked about. So that's been an ongoing project over the past few years of doing a pretty substantial amount of research into who they were, where they were, what they had, and what they did. A lot of that was comprising taking trips to Richmond to visit the Historical Society, where some of their documents are kept, and then also visiting the Library of Virginia, which houses most of the records, or Virginia's Revolutionary War records. So that culminated in, once we knew what they had, basically coordinating a pretty massive buy of cloth and various supplies to make the coats, which have been sitting very prettily for the last 10 months or so in big bolts of fabric in the cloth. And over the past month and a half, we've been going through the process of selecting staff who can portray Crockett's Western Battalion, measuring them, cutting patterns rather for them, and then assembly. So each of the people in the shop has more or less one uniform that they're working on, which is comprising of regimental coats, or basically heavy wool coats. That would be sort of the standard uniform, along with waistcoats made out of wool serge, which is a little bit lighter weight, and then trousers made out of Osnaburg, which is a variety of linen. We'll also end up making cartridge boxes, hats, and knapsacks, so to sort of finish out the kit. So we're sort of in the middle of it right now, working towards finishing the coats so we can move on to other projects.
All right, so how many of you had made an 18th century coat before we started this project?
Me.
Not I.
Not me.
I do not trifle with men, so no.
I have.
You're the one who taught me, and that I've only made 2, so this is still meh.
So how's the learning process going for you guys?
It hasn't been too bad for me because I've hand sewn a lot. I think the biggest thing that this has pushed me to do well is buttonholes.
Yeah.
How many buttonholes do you have per coat?
Sam.
In theory, a coat could have somewhere around 36 if it was fully functional. It tends to be the case with military clothing, particularly during the Revolutionary War, that they cut corners quite a bit. So for our coats, there really are only 12 functional buttonholes, and those are the ones on the lapels in the front and on the collar. We've omitted doing actual functional buttonholes on the cuffs or on the pockets, which would add a substantial number.
That's 12 on each side, correct?
Oh, yeah.
There's
Yeah.
24
24.
buttonholes.
Yeah. 12 on each side.
It's like
What was
we
I thinking?
didn't do
Ignore
just
Sam.
12.
Ignore Sam.
Speaking of buttonholes, can you...
Oh, yeah, I can mark those.
I need more buttonholes. Thank you.
So it's kind of a team effort, you guys learning and piecing together at the same time. Has that been useful to learn as you're doing with each other to kind of bounce ideas off of, double check your work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Which, of course, that's not really abnormal to how you'd be learning to sew if you were apprenticed to a tailor, is it, Sam?
Yeah, that kind of is how it would have worked. Labor in a tailor shop, or in most shops in the 18th century, really would have been divided by skill set. So it's not necessarily the case that every person is taking a garment from start to finish in the way that we do, or the way that we're currently doing. Rather, you would have learned a skill and then continued to do that skill until you're really good at it and then moved on to something else. So when you had started an apprenticeship, most of your job probably would have been keeping the fire going and keeping the irons hot and sweeping the floor. Over time, you would have progressed likely to doing seam work, so doing things like the back stitching that really puts a garment together. And as your skill progressed, you would have learned how to do buttonholes and various other things. Really all the people we have in the shop here are proficient enough at those early stages, things like backstitching, and thankfully with electricity we don't need to keep our irons hot, that they kind of could progress to a further step. Frankly, the nature of a regimental coat is pretty thick, heavy broadcloth that doesn't require a whole lot of work as far as sewing it together. It's pretty simplistic. It just takes a lot of time-consuming small stitches. The big thing for everybody learning here was learning how to do buttonholes in a way that is quick, right? Because with 24 of them, you want to get done with them as quick as possible. So it certainly was a learning process. The benefit for this project is that because we did it a little bit differently, everybody got a chance to do everything as opposed to an 18th century shop where, in theory, if we found out that Abby or Lindsay were the best buttonholers, they probably would do nothing but buttonholes, which I don't think they would be stoked
tired
about.
of it.
Yeah, no thank you.
I feel like more than that, it's the learning a different style of buttonhole that we all had to do, because we all make very rounded ones, and then you looked at us and went, no, square. Make them bookended.
Pretty angular. An 18th century buttonhole is pretty typical with just a straight slash and tacks on both ends.
So for those of you who have been sewing, especially hand sewing for a long time, is it difficult to basically relearn specific stitches and specific styles?
I think the hardest thing for me was honestly just getting used to sewing on the broadcloth because it's so thick. My fingers were in pain, severe pain, the first week of sewing, and now I've finally developed calluses, so it hurts less. But honestly, for me, it wasn't too difficult. I think the biggest difference is using historical materials and sewing with thicker linen thread rather than usual polyester stuff that you get from the craft store.
My issue is mostly just when you do women's gowns, it's all about draping them to the form, and this was all very, very flat patterned, so I kept wanting to drape it on the person, but that's not how this goes. So, and even like the hardiest women's stuff I've made has not been nearly as thick or as heavy as this, so that was a bit difficult.
I think terminology was my biggest problem, because I've learned very different names based on the movement of doing it versus you know the actual terms, and I have to look at you and go, what is this? What are we doing?
Obviously.
You gotta or the sounds.
Yeah.
The sounds that go with it.
You make fun. So do you think that any of this type of sewing will have real world applications for you guys?
Yeah. It's used a lot.
It does.
Now that I know they can make coats, I can assign them coats to make.
Whenever.
Yeah.
Really
All day.
We need more than just coats, but yes.
Yes, I want to get back to my gowns as soon as possible, please. Gowns, so nice, so thin, such tiny needles.
But I think a lot of us sew a lot of clothing for ourselves in general, so there's already a lot of crossover with the sewing that we're doing here and sewing that we do privately at home.
Yeah. We're not going to unless we are.
Well, that opens up a whole other couple questions, but so you guys end up sewing pretty much continuously here when you're assigned back to the costume shop. And then
8 hours a day.
8 hours a day, and then you go home, and how many of you take a break that day, or how many of you decide to go home and continue to sew?
I have 15 projects at home that I'm doing of various eras.
Yeah. I am behind on pattern testing a gown, the feedback for which is due tomorrow, and I just cut out my silk for the bodice. So I'm going home, and I am sewing for another 8 hours. And that's that.
To be clear, the Frontier Culture Museum does not encourage work on Frontier Culture Museum projects after hours.
No.
Yes, this is not a Frontier
projects
Culture.
These are personal,
Yeah.
personal projects.
I'm not allowed to be fancy at work. This is fancy stuff.
Personal projects.
Work projects stay here.
Yeah, I don't want to work on that at home.
Home projects are at home.
Yes.
I've got another 5 projects here to be doing. I did not count those.
Valid.
Actually, with the exception of one, because the stays that I'm making are going to be used here a lot.
Yeah.
But they are also personal.
But they're approved.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, if you had your pick of projects, why don't we just go around the table and just say what your most ambitious or most enticing project might be for here or in personal use?
What the one you're working on now?
The one velvet.
Yeah.
I am making a velvet ball gown that will have silk applique around the bottom that I've only just figured out how I'm going to cut out because silk scares me.
Valid.
But like 1830s sleeves with an 1850s-ish bodice, and I'm excited. I might be volunteering some people if they would like to help.
You got it. I am waiting for reasons, but probably stays and a corset because I'm newer to the historical world and I need those undergarments. So,
Well, right now, I am sewing a zone front gown, which if anyone knows those beasties, if you have one wrinkle, they look terrible. So, there's that. But in terms of most ambitious, my house was built in 1900 and it looks very similar to how it looked back then. And I want to make myself a whole suit of clothes for 1900. So I can sit on my fancy little couch and drink my fancy little coffee and be dressed fancy. But I am also working with silk on my zone front gown, and it's striped silk. It's narrow striped silk, and the back has 5 pieces.
Why?
Because
Why?
because Davis had a ton of silk, and also it's green and gold, and I look like a Shrek swamp creature. It's
In
awesome.
fairness, it is a pretty ugly, like, olive shred.
No, it is not ugly. It looks
actually
fantastic.
pretty. Now that I know what she's making it from, but
Yes.
why would you make that with stripe?
Because that's all I had.
that's true.
That's true.
Also,
gonna be
I
solid
wanted a
budget.
challenge. That was irresponsible of me, but I'm going to look like Fiona in it. It's going to be fantastic. And yes, that is not necessarily my most ambitious project, but that's what I'm working on now.
No, that's pretty tiny stripe. That's pretty.
I mean, I've worked on more ambitious things.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty.
I have a Robe La
Yeah.
Française I haven't finished.
I'm in the same boat as Abby. I'm getting ready to make a corset because mine is currently too small and it is very annoying to wear.
Personally, I don't know why anyone would want to aspire to sew anything but regimental coats. They're so
Oh my gosh.
And maybe if you're a girl, you want to sew something different.
you know,
Yeah.
historically
Yeah.
speaking, some girls wore regimental coats too.
I'd be down for
They
it.
just pretended
Right.
to be boys. Probably my project I'm looking forward to most right now are leather breeches. It's a piece of material culture that is intensely underrepresented. And really, without the work of Jay Howlett, who is the master saddler, artificer, and leather breeches maker at Colonial Williamsburg, and the apprentices and journeymen that work under him, that trade would not be alive. So the knowledge that he gave to me, or that rather they gave to me, has been pretty useful and something we're going to start doing in mass here at the Frontier Culture Museum. Beyond that, honestly, at this point, when it comes to other men's clothing, I've done enough of it that none of it really stands out. Yeah, my favorite coat is always my next one.
That's
Yeah.
as soon as you get one done, there's always a plan for the next. Immediately.
Pretty much.
So is there a different sense of satisfaction with you guys making the coats now, which are not personally going to be used, versus something that you're going to use for personal use?
Can actually see it get used.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get to wear all of my cool pretty things at home all the time, but I get to see things get worn here and used.
I cut corners on my at-home stuff because I know I'm the one who's going to be wearing them, and then I never go back to fix it. So it's kind of nice that this is actually finished on the inside.
And these are also going to be used for the MTA event in Jamestown, and that's a really big event, so even if we can't be there, we're there because we made the garments that they're wearing. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I like the one thinking.
Yeah.
They're in spirit.
I mean, they wouldn't be there if we hadn't made the coats for them, so.
Which is also an interesting interpretive point as to if the unit themselves is not producing these coats, who was producing the coats, and, you know, if there was some sort of connection with militia groups where a lot of wives would produce some of their garments that the husbands are wearing. Of course, regimental is a little bit different. It's controlled by the government supplies.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. When you look at wartime clothing, there's an interesting mix between home-produced things and sort of more professionally produced things. The vast majority of men in Virginia would have owned a hunting shirt, which is something we haven't worked at making yet, but eventually we will. And the likelihood of someone's wife making them a hunting shirt is significantly higher than most other garments in their wardrobe. Regimental coats, we don't really know how Crockett's were produced, whether they had a legitimate tailoring operation in where they were being housed in Charlottesville, whether they were employing local tailors or seamstresses to work on them, of which there wouldn't have been that many tailors in the area, or potentially if they were utilizing some combination of that, or the various prisoners of war from Saratoga who were also in the area. We really don't know. We know that they had the cloth, we know that they made the coats, but the nature of who made them and when and how is a little bit lost to history.
So, Sam, when you became costume coordinator, you ended up doing pretty much everything back here. You have to catch up on how women's garments are made, what type of garments go where, to which periods, because we have a very long sense of history here, a sense of fashion that we portray. How difficult has it been to catch up on?
Super difficult. The Frontier Culture Museum, as far as the costume department, services 3 different centuries worth of clothing and a variety of different cultures, which can present a pretty significant challenge from a costume and clothing perspective. The other factor, which is pretty significant, is that the history of the Frontier Culture Museum has been a history of really progressive living history and improvement over time, where as research is done, things have changed, and that certainly is the case with the interpretation and the dates related to a lot of the farms at the museum, where as we've gotten better research, we've adjusted and changed the interpretive dates in a way that also requires changes in clothing, which is something that we have sort of had to challenge ourselves to work with over time. So trying to rein in all of that is a pretty big challenge on my desk that I have to work through. We have somewhere between 25 and 30 staff, if we're fully staffed, in costume throughout the museum, of which many of them have to have multiples of clothing and different clothing for different farms, which requires quite a bit of organization, a pretty hefty inventory system, and then pretty regular maintenance with repairs and replacing things. So it is a pretty daunting task. In the past, the Frontier Culture Museum has not employed a full-time costumer or a full-time person for that. Multiple staff have had to pitch in and do that while also doing all the other things that interpreters need to do here at the museum. So my position is a little bit unique in that it is more strongly dedicated towards working in the shop. And it's something that was pretty necessary for us to continue to represent ourselves and particularly through clothing at a high level.
Necessary for function.
Yeah.
In general.
Mm-hmm.
So with all of your gathered expertise, do we pretty much have a lot of the time periods covered? Is there any particular periods that any of you prefer or are more knowledgeable about?
I like 17th century. Let me sew 17th century clothing, please. Thank you. I'll even get over the fact that it's English 17th century. It's better than French.
I much prefer
That's a
19th century.
Yes.
Any day.
19th century is our friend.
Especially 50s.
Yes.
I'm in 18th century right now the most, so I will say 18th century.
We got them all covered now.
Abby's answer was the correct answer.
Okay, if you don't want to do
biased.
17th, that's fine, because then I will cover 17th.
Sam
for
is
you.
gonna pay me
This
later.
is why you have me in...
Yeah, so you've got,
Lindsay.
you can do all the fun stuff
Yeah.
you want to do, and then you can have the other people pick up slack.
I wish it were that simple.
Delegate. Give us projects. Send us on
Yeah.
our way.
Don't have
We
too much
will
mind
run with
about it.
So, how is it when you're working on a project for a period you just don't care about? Does that cause any consternation? Why am I doing this?
I wouldn't say don't care about. It's
Mhm.
just a whole different perspective to things.
And there's different motivation too.
Yeah.
It's just a shape I don't like as much, but that doesn't mean I don't like sewing the shape.
19th
It's
century
a
is
new
government.
challenge.
I
It's a
was
new
headed more
challenge.
towards that comment, Sam. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
if the 19th century is a government myth. We don't need it.
No.
No.
We're not doing this again. No.
So there is a
Right.
very large difference in shapes and styles, even within a century. How do we make the determination of what gets portrayed on the sites?
There's research.
The thing that is really at the fore when it comes to that is material culture. Looking at material culture, both extant original pieces of clothing, but also looking pretty extensively at images, paintings, drawings, and trying to draw almost archetypes for what clothing should look like for any given subject or period, which that can be a pretty significant challenge.
But with all of us being in very specific eras, that would make your life a little easier
Yeah.
too, though, because
It does.
my computer is set up to research 19th century, and trying to look up 18th century stuff now is not cooperating.
Yeah. It is a pretty difficult task. The other thing that sort of ratchets up the difficulty level for us is that some of the cultures we're looking at are more obscure. Available material for looking at mid 18th century Germany is not as pronounced as mid 18th century England, which can provide a challenge for us. Same thing, when you're looking at our 19th century farms, the prevalence of material culture specific to the Shenandoah Valley or the Valley of Virginia is not as pronounced as the material culture for the 19th century writ large. So sometimes narrowing in and getting as correct and specific as we can takes a lot more work than just going with what was the most basic or typical for a period. So it's a constant process. We constantly are coming across new things, learning new things, and then adjusting, changing, or reworking clothing as needed, which it is not a one-man job. It's something that kind of takes a village in a certain sense.
Particularly since we have different levels of social class, especially compared to what is extant.
Yeah, and beyond that, the issue with class is also an issue of how class dictates clothing over time. And it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. The differences in class through clothing, change as time goes on. So it's something we have to address quite a bit as well.
Anybody have any final comments, thoughts?
I think the research is the biggest learning curve. Like
Right.
when you go from like hobby sewing to actually sewing for an established museum, just like first of all knowing where to get sources, and then knowing it's not just, oh well that works. It's why does it work? Who was wearing it? Why were they wearing it? What fabric are they wearing? Why are they wearing that fabric? What color can they wear? What color can they not wear? There's a lot more levels to consider than just, oh, that kind of looks historic. That works.
That looks
So,
close enough.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Personally, my favorite part is finding the most outlandish and weirdest stuff for Germany. I found a hat that was popular in the Palatinate, which is our region. That is called a Pelzkappe, so a fur hat, basically. But they're massive and strange, and everyone had a super weird one. And the moment I showed our head of interpretation, he was like, ha! I love that out there stuff. Germans were really out there. It was great.
That's definitely the biggest learning curve.
Oh, yeah.
It's the research.
The biggest onus we have, which we constantly have to remind ourselves of, is that as an educational institution and as a institution that tries to aspire to progress and progressive interpretation, the sort of bar for research and for quality for us is a bit higher in that we try to set the curve as much as we can as opposed to be behind it. So we end up having to often put in a lot more research than if we were just making clothing for ourselves to try to keep up with that standard.
All right, guys. Final question. What's the worst mistake you've ever made in sewing?
Okay, that's a good caveat.
These buttonholes right now.
So, you can describe for the class.
Yeah, so I'm working on buttonholes, and we're doing it on a very light wool. So I have a layer of linen, a thick layer of canvas, and I also have a layer of wool on top. And I over gimped, which is basically giving structure to the buttonhole. And the fabric just isn't the easiest to work with anyway, so they were wobbly and large and massive and thick, and I hated them, and I want them to die in a fire. And I am picking them out right now. I am picking them out right now because I'm going to redo them and make them better. But yeah.
I decided it was a great idea to make a female riding habit version of the coats we're working on right now in wool, lighter wool than this. In August, it got to be almost 100 degrees that day, and there was my chemise, my stays, my riding habit shirt, then a wool waistcoat, and then a wool jacket, and there was a linen petticoat and a wool petticoat, and I was dying. Oh, and I had a wool hat, too. So that's the worst mistake I've ever made.
Next.
I'm still trying to think.
She's processing.
So...
Sam?
It's because the more you sew, the more mistakes you make, so.
Yeah.
Yep. It's hard to pick
And
them out.
half of them I just kind of leave because, historically speaking, mistakes were made so often that it just makes it look more accurate.
Yeah.
Everybody makes mistakes.
Like, certain mistakes you have to rip out and start over, but...
Like my buttonholes.
The great Bob Ross said, "There are no mistakes, just happy accidents." When it comes to
Yes.
sewing, he was wrong. The number of times I've ripped things out and redone them are pretty darn high. Master tailor Mark Hutter at Colonial Williamsburg is famously quoted as saying, "That looks really good. Rip it out and do it again," which is the thing. Another pretty well-known master tailor, Henry Cook, is famously known as saying that buttonholes are tough. The first 1,000 are the worst 1,000. And that's probably true. The more I look back at older clothing I made, the less I usually enjoy wearing it. That's part of why I also like saying my favorite coat is my next coat. But I think that's pretty important in sewing. As an apprentice, you would have started out with making some stuff that probably you had to rip out and do again with a high degree of frequency. But when you are able, over time, to look at a piece of material culture and copy it, and you all at home might not be able to see it, but Caitlin is pretty gleeful about the apron she's finished.
That's right. She's so happy.
It is an intensely satisfying thing to know that you were able to copy a piece of material culture as closely as you can. So it's all a learning process.
I think my biggest mistake was the stays that I am currently finishing, because I started them 2 years ago thinking they were the same as 19th century corsets, and did no research and just jumped in, and that was a big ol' mistake.
How many mock-ups did you make?
I don't even know. Too many. I ended up using the mock-ups for the center of this one because it's the proper 5 layers, but that was not fun.
Yeah. I feel like the worst mistake I made was putting sleeves on backwards and on the wrong side, and then not realizing until I was like halfway done with it. And then you have to take it off.
That's
yeah,
just sleeves in general,
just
though.
Exactly. But like,
Sleeves-
that's the only thing coming to my brain.
Sleeves are the enemy. Here.
If it goes well the first time, something's terribly wrong elsewhere.
Oh, thank you guys. Be sure to come down and check out the fruits of their labors when you can come and visit the Frontier Culture Museum and see everyone in costume.
Thank you,
Sketch.
Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.